Welcome back. This is Pottery 101 with Mr. G, yours truly here. I'm just going to run you through the basics of making a pot on the wheel. So assuming that you wedged your clay correctly, you'll have about a 2-pound chunk. This is pretty much about a 2-pound chunk. We've got a little green scale here that you can weigh out the chunk. To try to get exact, try to maybe mimic the video. So you've got that. This is fully wedged, ready to go. No air bubbles, hopefully. Also, you've got your basic pottery wheel. So the splash guard, it fits on just by moving it towards yourself. It kind of clamps on each other and then goes. You'll put these together. These should be together before you throw. To take them off, again, just pull towards you on lift, or lift this up, and take both pieces to the sink, clean them off, put them back where you got them. You got your wheel head. This baby, when turned on, should always spin counterclockwise. And you want to make sure that you don't have any long hair or baggy clothes or anything around this wheel head, or even have your hands down here. If you do and somehow the wheel gets turned on, it could grab you and pull you under. Not good. We'll have to take you to the hospital. You can probably break your arm, break your wrist, that kind of thing. So steer clear of that. Just keep your hands free of it. It's okay to be touching it and whatnot, but just be very mindful of that, please. Then you have a bat. It's just a plastic piece that fits onto the wheel head. It's got 2 little notches here. You just fit it right onto the wheel head, just like so. Give it a pat. It's ready to go. There are 2 sides. There's one smooth side and kind of a rough textured side to it. You want the textured side up. That's going to help with adhesion, gripping your clay, that kind of thing. Hand tools. You have a sponge, just a typical sponge, little dish of water, a sponge on a stick. If you have a pot that's tall and skinny and narrow, you can't get your hand into it. The brush on the stick works to get the water out. You'll have a ceramic knife tool. It's just a little wooden tool with a blade on it, a point. And we'll be trimming with this. The other end has a little concave scoop type of thing. So that's a hand tool. You'll have your needle tool. That's a must. You'll have 3 different kinds of ribs. This is completely optional and depending, on who is actually throwing. I prefer the plastic ribs. They're a little more pliable. You can move them a little bit easier. You can use them to throw, do a shaping pull, that kind of thing. So there's 2 sides, flat side, and there's kind of a rounded surface here to use. So there's that rib. You have a standard wooden rib. Works about the same way, but obviously not flexible whatsoever. So you have that, and then you have a metal rib. These can be a little bit fickle. They're still flexible, but they can dig into your pottery really easy, so you're going to have to watch that. So those are your 3 ribs, and then you have a wire tool to pull and sear your pot off of the bat. So to begin, step number 1 is centering and coning. Now, it involves putting the clay in the middle, coning it up, and coning it down. And I'll run you through that. First off, dampen your bat a little bit. You don't need a lot of water, just a little bit of a damp sponge, and just kind of rub it on there. You don't want it super wet by any means, otherwise the clay is going to slip around on you. So I usually put a little bit of water on there, kind of dry it off just a little bit, just so it's slightly damp. Helps with adhesion purposes. You've already got a clay body with a little bit of a rounded bottom to it, such as that, and that's going to help with adhesion. Now with both hands, normally I find center, just turn it on, find center, make a little mark, a little clean mark. It's a little dry for my taste. Wet it down again, find the center. Now with both hands, or one hand, just slam that thing down on there. Doesn't need to be super hard, but it can't be really light. You got to really put it on there with some pressure. Okay. Now that seems fairly well centered. even though it's kind of rough and bumpy and moving and that kind of thing. That'll be pretty good for what we need. So normally your wheels, that's full speed. You're down to about a quarter speed, half speed, 3/4. Normally for this, I usually go about 3/4 speed for centering and for coning, and then we'll slow it down through later steps. So number one, water is key. If your hands are gripping and moving with the clay, that's not good. You want them to freely slide over. Now notice my posture. My seat is about just above level with the wheel. I'm up on it. Inside of my legs are around the splash guard. Nose looking straight directly down at that. Now, my elbows will also be grounded into my thighs and my hips, so I can work this way. What that's doing is transferring energy into the clay from my arm and allowing you to really give it upper body support. If you're up like this, you don't have much. You're using core strength to try to center it. Chances are it's not going to work very well. Have your arms grounded. It'll help you out a considerable amount with controlling your hands and pressures and really getting the clay to stick in one place. So first off, I'm just going to start by applying pressure right on the sides and just starting to get it to get centered here. I'm going to compress it down. Notice my hands. My left hand is at 9 o'clock. I'm just sliding on it. The balls of my hands touching the clay. My top one, if it isn't sticky, is more like this, or I'll interlock my thumbs, just like that. And I'll push down and in. Make sure your hands are always having pressure between them. Make sure the left knows what the right's doing, and so forth. Wet it down. Now I'm pushing in at about a 7 o'clock from my elbow in with the palm of my hand. Okay? You don't want to mushroom it. You don't want to go under it like that. You want to make sure your hand is angled and in, just like so. Grab your thumb. This just keeps the clay from either moving up, and it keeps it nice and flat. That's what we need, is more of a shape about like that. Oops. Shape about like that. So I'm going to go back, apply pressure, and slowly slide my hand up the clay body. It's definitely a little bit more centered. It appears like it's not even moving. It's just spinning. That's exactly what we want at this point. Still a little rough on the outside, but that's okay. That'll go away once we cone. Now, to cone, you can lock your hands just like so. Let them rest on the outside. With your arms grounded, just push towards the center of the clay body. Notice how I'm using my thumbs to keep it nice and flat on top. And I'm slowly pushing my hand up. Now what this is doing is creating a skirt. We've already created a skirt here. You can see it right. It's connecting your clay body to the bat itself. That prevents water from getting underneath of it. That's what we want. Otherwise the clay could shift off at any moment. We'll wet it down again. I'm going to continue to cone up. Just applying pressure on the outside of it and slowly moving my hands straight up. Now what this is doing, this is helping to align clay particles, realign the memory of the clay, and it's also pushing any air bubbles that were in and up. So we're going to do this process about 3 times before we're ready to actually throw the pottery. I'm going to kind of cone it up just a little bit more there. That's the first cone up. Nice and flat on the top. Remember to always float away. Never make any sudden movements. Always just float away. Okay? Now, cone down, number 1. Just grab it, let it slide, and lean it slightly to your right. Compress just a little bit. Float away. Now notice my arm is still grounded. I'm pushing at about 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And with my hands together and pressure between them, I'm moving it down. Remember not to mushroom it. If you undercut it, chances are the clay will fold over and it'll trap air. Then you've got a whole lot of other problems. So, recentering it again, sliding my hands on it, making sure that there's always pressure between my hands. We're going to cone up again. So this is the second cone up. Again, plenty of water, squeeze, slowly slide up the clay body. Float away. Lean it, hands together, collapse it, cone it down. Back to the original center position. Last cone. This is the third one. Plenty of water, squeeze, keep squeezing. You don't want to squeeze too much because it'll actually tear the clay and break it off. So use your discretion. That's the third one. That's the third cone of this clay body, of this pot. Once my hands are all full of slip, that's completely fine. Just wipe it off. Now, chances are if there were air bubbles in this, excuse me, if there were air bubbles in this, all of them move towards the center and up. So we're going to put my foot on the pedal. We're going to take and kind of slow this down just a little bit. And I'm going to drag. Notice how I'm bracing with my thumb, allowing my hand, my left hand, to freely slide on the outside of it. Make sure it's nice and make sure it's wet enough. The top ½ inch or so, I'm just going to place my needle tool there, nicely braced on my thumb. I'm going to cut into it, let it cut straight until it stops spinning, and pick it off. Now chances are this little bit of clay actually had a couple of air bubbles in it, and actually, I just pushed it there and there must have been an air bubble right there. So that's good to do, and it also gives you a little bit of clay to stick your needle tool in so you're not reaching for it, stabbing yourself in your water bin. So we'll get it back up to speed, and I'll cone it down, make sure you wet the clay enough. Foot off the pedal, lean it, back down. No mushroom. Then back to the original centering form. Sticking a little bit on me. Back to the original center form, and then just hold your hands there. Slide them up, make sure the top is flat. Voila. Perfectly de-aired and centered. And clean my bat up there a little bit. It's a good thing for a metal rib to do. Now, next step. That was step one. Centering and coning up and down. Step two, wet the clay. Now, there are two different methods of doing this. This is digging. You can put your thumbnails together in the center, just like so. Let your fingers just slide across the outside. Find center and make a quick indentation or a quick divot. Okay, you just dug a well. You're going to fill that well with water because when you get into new clay down here, it's going to stick to your fingers, and you don't want that because it'll throw it off center. You always want it nice and slimy, nice and smooth on the outside to manipulate it. Now, you can continue going in this fashion, or as I prefer to do it, I take my left hand at 9 o'clock, just let it slide, take my hand straight, between my thumb and my index finger fits perfectly underneath my thumb knuckle, just like so. Then I kind of angle my hand and I put my ring finger, or my ring finger and my index finger on top of my middle finger. We'll find right at center, and I'll just push straight down. keeping your hand at the angle, but remembering to push straight down. Now, you want to push down till there's about a ½ inch of clay between your finger and the bat. That's about what you want for the foot of your pot, is about a ½ inch. Okay? If it's any thicker than that, we're going to have to trim it. And so this is kind of a crucial stage. Make sure it's not gripping on you when you're pushing. I'm about there. For this purpose, I'll just take it off the bat so you can see. Put it back on the bat. Get it back up to speed. So you just dug your well. Okay, now we're ready to spread the walls. We're not pulling yet, but we're spreading the walls out. So this is the inside of the base, the inside of your vessel. However wide you want it, you just keep pulling it. I'm going to try to go tall with this one. So I'm going to add a little bit of water, make sure it's nice and wet on the outside. Same position, and I'm just going to drag my finger straight towards me. Now you don't want to drag your finger up. You don't want to drag your finger down. You want to drag your finger straight across from the bottom of the well, the bottom of the hole that you just made. You just let it slide and pull straight towards you for as wide as you want your vessel. That's nice and even, still centered. Then you're going to take a sponge and more or less a dry sponge, or kind of a damp sponge but no water in it. You're going to press right down in the middle of that and just kind of hold it and put pressure towards the outside. What you're doing is compressing your bottom. You're making it nice and flat. You're pulling excess water out. And it'll be a lot easier for you to pull that way. Okay? Again, I'll take it off the wheel. Show you that I just pulled it. Okay? Just spread the walls. Now, this is the part that gives most people problems. This part, your left hand and your right hand need to absolutely know what they're doing at all times. I'm going to clean up my bat there a little bit. Now, we were up to about that speed. You want to bring it down to about half speed. Half speed of the wheel. That works actually pretty well for this. The faster it is, if you make any minor mistake, chances are the pot's going to go off center and ruin your pot. So try to slow it down a little bit. As you get better with this, you can test the speed up. You can throw it a little bit faster. Just remember that every little bit that you pull up, the clay has to make one full revolution. So we're moving at a pretty slow pace here when we're going to pull our walls. So step one, again, was centering and coning. And you cone down and center it. Step two was digging your well. Step three was spreading the walls. Step four, that we're at right now, is pulling your walls. So what you want to do, make sure there's plenty of water. Water out the sides, water out in the center. Make sure it's nice and smooth, nice and slippery everywhere. Okay? Now this is different hand techniques will work for different people, but this is how I learned, and this is how I typically teach it. I found it to be the easiest. You take your right hand at 3 o'clock, make a fist, crooked finger. Now that crooked finger is going to rest on the outside of the pot. Okay? On the inside is just the ball of your finger, of your middle finger. Now I like to put my hands together like this, so I kind of have pinchers. It's just the left thumb over the right thumb with the crooked finger. Make sure it's nice and wet. Make sure you're still grounded. And this one's always going to be a little bit higher than the other one. Okay? It's always going to be a little bit higher, and you want to have equal pressure. You don't want too much. If you have too much pressure on the inside, it'll go out this way. If you have too much here, it'll continue to cone in. So the trick is to have equal pressure and just squeeze and pull. After every pull, let your fingers loosely slide, minimal amount of pressure here. Make sure they're not grabbing or anything. Take your sponge and just kind of compress the rim. Now compressing the rim, it just helps to equal it out, keeps the top of your pot somewhat equal with the rest of the walls down here, and prevents any jagged edges from catching. So that was the first pull. Second pull, typically you only want to make about 3 pulls, and then we can do a shaping pull. Take the water out the bottom of it. Again, squeeze with your left and the right. Make sure there's equal pressure. Less pressure at the top, and float away. No sudden jerks, no sudden movements. I'll compress my rim again. Nice rounded lip on that. I'm going to make my final pull. Wet the walls. This is perfect time for brush on a stick, or sponge on a stick, excuse me. There. Pull that water out. Any excess water in the bottom is going to give you S cracks, and it'll go all the way through the base of your pot, all the way through the foot. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible, otherwise you have a non-functional pot. So again, wet the walls, squeeze on the bottom, pull straight up, float away. Compress your rim, get nice and even. Now, this particular pot, is a little wider at the top than it is the bottom. So I'm going to bulge the bottom out a little bit. Now, you can do this a couple different ways. Brush on or sponge on a stick, pull that water out. You can do this a couple different ways. Here's where I like to use my rib, my plastic flexible rib. Wet it down, make sure your hands are nice and wet. On the inside, you're going to apply a little bit of pressure, but on the outside, you're going to apply less pressure. So on the inside, just out, and then slowly up. A little more pressure with the rib on the inside, or on the outside, excuse me. Just follow that up. Float away. You can also do it, make sure your hand is wet, and just push your fingers out. At the bottom, make sure they're not digging in. Getting a little thin now, so clay definitely has its limitations in terms of how much you can throw it and how much stress it can take. And we're kind of reaching our limits here with this particular pot. So pulling the water out. It's okay if it's a little wobbly, just like it is. We'll get it back to center. So then you're going to take, I like that shape on the outside. You're going to take a little bit of water On the outside, I'm going to try to collar this in a little bit. Now this is just equal pressure on the outside, making sure that it's nice and even. You're just applying pressure to the clay if it isn't too thin. If it's too thin, it'll start to buckle a little bit. I'm starting to collar this up just a little bit. Change the shape of the pot back to a little bit more of a traditional looking pot. Not wobbling quite as bad now. So there's that. Pretty decent looking pot. Now we're going to kind of add, we're going to trim the foot on this thing. Now you're going to need your little wooden knife, and what this is going to do, you're going to go at about a 45-degree angle in both directions. And you're just going to find where the base is, and you're going to go straight down to the bat. You can hear it scraping the bat right now. What that does is it sheds clay away from the clay body, and that way we can pull that off. So I've done that. I'm going to grab my needle tool and bracing it, try to get it as horizontal as possible. You're going to go underneath that ring of clay that you just made until it reaches the point where you can see the bat where the metal knife was scraping on. At that point, you're going to shut your wheel off. You'll know it's ready when that clay lurches up and it moves back towards the clay body. Stop the wheel, find where the edge is, make one incision out, carefully remove the excess clay. Seems pretty easy, right? Well, it is. Then we're going to clean this up. We're going to use our wooden knife again. We're just going to clean up the bat. And we're going to clean up that bottom. Make a little bit of an undercut down there at the very bottom of it, where the clay body is connected to the bat. And that gives it a shadow line for our wire tool when we cut it off the wheel. I think that looks pretty nice. So we're going to take the metal rib now. Make sure my hands are nice and wet. I'm going to slow the wheel down just a little bit more. There we go. Now, always at a 45, you never want to turn your rib in toward yourself. You always want it out. You can take and drag the rim on the outside. You'll see it's getting full of slip. Just wipe that off. So yeah, I like to curl it a little bit more. Let it drag. Match the contour of your pot. Brace it on the inside. Just let it slide. You're not pressing really. What this is doing, this is helping to dry your pot, helping to get rid of fingerprints, stuff like that. And I want to compress my rim again here really quick, because it's this stuff off my fingers. Press that rim just a little bit more. It gives you kind of a nice outside to it. You can take this even more with the plastic rib. Now remember, there were two sides to it. Now is when you use the flat side towards the pot. You can use the rounded side as well if you prefer. But I like the finish myself a little more. Slow the wheel down just a little bit. Considerable amount, actually. A little too fast there. Use the rounded side when you get into your contours. Maybe use your metal rim. So metal rim to create a different feature on the neck. Now you have your foot, you have your body, you have your neck, and then you have your rim. Typical anatomy of a pot. I'm going to do something here that is going to add a little bit of a bubble. I'm going to kind of wind this out just a little bit more. I'm going to bring this in. Ooh, see it gripping? More water on the outside. Kind of push this in just a little bit more. Change the pot a little bit. You can take another couple of different little tools. It's got all sorts of different surfaces to them. We can create maybe a little rim here if it's not too thin. Take a sponge, wipe off that extra slip. Remember to take your time. Rome wasn't built in a day, but pots were. So just relax. Try not to get too frustrated. You can see I'm starting to play with that lip a little bit more. Play with the rim a little bit more. That's a nice looking pot. I'm going to take another tool. Has kind of a ball on the end of it. And applying pressure on the inside, just slight pressure, and pressure on the outside where your finger is at, or where your tool is at, and where your finger is. Just press into the clay a little bit more. And this is all for personal aesthetic, decoration, that kind of thing. We have all sorts of different tools. You can drag and do all sorts of kind of funky stuff. This one here has little knives, little notches set on it, smaller notches on this side here. Just make sure it's wet. There's no dry particles on it or anything. Again, wet hand, inside of the pot. Just let it drag. Pull it straight away. Take and clean up one of the edges. There, a little bit of the edge there. There you have a decorated pot. Now there's tons of water still on the inside of this, and that's where the brush on the stick works really well too. Just gonna go in the pot, pull all of that water out, kind of push on it a little bit. That'll help compress the bottom again. Press on the walls, slow it down just a little bit. Make sure you try to get out as much water as possible out of the inside. And always on this side, if you go over here, it's just going to drag you over to the right side. So let it drag, let it do its work, let it do its job. And there you have it. I'm going to try to clean this up just a little bit more. Got a little crumbly on me here. See if I don't ruin it. There we go. And that'll help to identify the body of the clay. Help to separate that, the neck. Now up here, what I kind of like to do, I like to decorate my pots as much as possible. This one here, still got a little bit of nonsense on it. So I'm going to kind of bunch my sponge up a little bit, make sure I get all that nonsense off of there. Remember, you tell the clay what to do. You don't let the clay tell you. You're in control of this. Easy enough to throw a pot, just like so. Now it's pretty thin in some areas, I would imagine, but it's functional nonetheless. So you always want to try to keep it about a 1/2 inch thick, 1/4 inch thick, somewhere around there. Sometimes it'll get even thinner, but chances are if it gets too thin, it'll just collapse on itself. So I'm going to take a clean end, the ball tool again, and now directly at 3 o'clock, I'm just going to make a dot, twist it and pull. I'm going to line that up there. Do another one directly across from it. We'll line that up directly with me. Do another one that's at 90 degrees. Line that up with me, and that should be directly out that direction. There we go. Just a little bit more decoration to it. Get rid of your fingerprints on the inside if you so choose. So happy with this rim here. So take your finger and just lay it underneath of it. Let your fingers glide. You can change the rim just a little bit. Pull it up if you like, or pull it down. See, it's getting really weak. It's starting to warp a little bit. So we're kind of pressing our luck here with this rim. Yep. There it went. I went a little too much with it, and it buckled. So we're going to take our needle tool at a slow speed, find the bottom of it, and just until it touches your finger, so that it slide in one place, lift straight up. That's kind of sad. I kind of like that lip on there, but that's what happens when you play with it too much. So we're going to compress that rim again. We can try to pull it out just a little bit. There we go. Not quite the effect, but still a fairly handsome pot nonetheless. So a little bit of water on the inside. And voila, you have your pot. Fully decorated pot, ready for pre-glaze or ready for firing. Now, the last step, the absolute last step, other than drying and glazing and all that kind of stuff, is getting this off the bat. Now, keep it running. You have your wire tool. Above your ring finger on both hands and below your middle finger, in between, grab your wire tool just like that. It's got 2 little handles on it. Grab it around your fingers and put your thumbs. You want pressure straight down. That's going to go directly onto your bat. And you're just going to slowly pull towards yourself. Make sure that you're not pulling up. You're not pulling, I mean, you can't really pull down. You want to pull down as much as possible. Make sure you're not pulling up, okay? Foot on the pedal. When it reaches to about here, just shut it off and keep moving. So there. Shut it off. That's it. Ready for drying processes. Lip on it there. Draw your name on it or your initials and period number. Take your metal rib. Sometimes it's hard to get these bats off. Take your metal rib between the wheel head and the bat. Lift it up. Got your name, initial, and a pot ready to go, ready to dry. That's it. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm around all the time. Happy pottery. Good luck. Godspeed. Take care.